The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes wasn't a face. It wasn't a hand reaching for mine, or flowers on the bedside table, or even a nurse checking on a monitor. It was a manila envelope sitting on my chest. Just sitting there, like it had been waiting for me longer than any person in that building had. I'd been in a coma for 2 years, 3 months, and 14 days. And the woman I'd spent 6 years building a life with had walked into my room, dropped a legal envelope on a man who couldn't sit up on his own, signed the visitor log, and walked back out. She didn't say my name. She didn't touch me. She smelled like the perfume I'd bought her for our 3rd anniversary. That detail hit me harder than anything written inside those papers. What she didn't know, what her greed had completely blinded her to, is that you can't divorce someone you were never legally married to in the first place. She thought she'd taken everything. She had actually just handed me the key to her own destruction. My name is Derek Callahan. I'm 46 years old. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, the kind of city where men go to work before sunrise and don't make a big deal about it. In 2002, I started a regional freight and logistics company with 2 leased G-Gay and a contract I'd landed by cold calling a distribution center in Xenia until someone picked up. By the time I was 39, we were running 43 vehicles across 7 states, and I had more work than I had drivers. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what I had, G-Day. I can tell you what she tried to take. I met Ashley at an industry dinner in Columbus in the spring of 2017. I was sitting at a table near the GDK, half listening to a keynote about fuel cost projections, when she came up to the bar beside me and asked whether the chicken was worth it. She'd read something about our company in a trade publication and asked me 3 intelligent questions about fleet optimization in a row without pausing. I'm not a man who's easy to impress. I was genuinely impressed. She was beautiful in a way that didn't announce itself. You'd be in a room with her 10 minutes before you noticed. She remembered things I'd mentioned 6 weeks earlier like they'd mattered to her. She laughed at the right moments, and she knew how to be quiet in the right ones too. Within a year, she had a key to my house in Beaver Creek. Within 2 years, she was managing my personal investment accounts, my real estate holdings, and the administrative side of my private finances. I was buried in operations, driver contracts, fuel hedging, compliance renewals, and I needed someone to handle the other side of the house. She had a background in financial planning. She was organized, she was thorough, she said all the right things about our future. I trusted her in a way that, looking back, I can only describe as a decision I made once and never revisited. That's the kind of trust that costs you everything when it's placed wrong. There were signs. I want to be honest with you about that. There were moments I chose to explain away. She started taking phone calls out on the back deck at night, said it was work stuff she didn't want to disturb me with. Her laptop password changed without her mentioning it. She began making small, careful comments about the people closest to me. My operations manager, my buddy Kevin, a cousin I talked to regularly. Nothing direct, just the slow, patient work of separating a man from his own circle. I noticed. I filed it away. I told myself I was being paranoid. I wasn't. The wedding happened about 3 years in. She'd been hinting at it for months, and when I finally asked her properly, she lit up in the way that makes a man feel like he got something right. She said she wanted to handle most of the planning herself, her gift to me, so I could just show up and be present. I thought that was thoughtful. I've never been a man who cares about table linens and seating charts. We flew down to Nassau in the Bahamas on a Thursday in October. Her work colleague was there, her college roommate, 2 women I barely knew. My side was Kevin and my cousin Ray. The ceremony was at sunset on the beach. She'd found the officiant herself, a distinguished older man with silver hair and a white linen suit, who smiled the way someone smiles when they've done something 1,000 times. We signed documents on a small folding table with a white tablecloth. The Atlantis resort was lit up across the water. I remember thinking that I'd finally gotten something right in my personal life that matched what I'd built in my professional one. What I didn't know, and what she had engineered with a precision that still turns my stomach, is that the man in the white linen suit was an actor. She'd hired him through a Nassau talent agency. The documents we signed were blank forms she'd printed herself. There was no marriage license, no civil record, no legal union of any kind. She had created the appearance of a marriage without any of the legal obligations that come with one. She wanted spousal access to my finances and the social status of being my wife, while keeping the exit ramp completely clear. No divorce proceedings, no asset division, no paper trail connecting her to anything I'd built. That's who I'd been living with. The accident happened November 14th, 2021, a Tuesday. Route 35 heading home from a late meeting at a distribution site in Xenia. It was raining hard, the kind of November rain that turns headlights into smears. A semi drifted across the center line. I saw the lights. Then nothing. 2 years, 3 months, and 14 days of nothing. During that time, Ashley was not the devoted partner waiting for me to come back. She showed up at the hospital in the early weeks. She gave a brief interview to a local TV station about brain injury advocacy. She stood in my ICU room and cried in front of the attending physician. And then, around month 3, when the doctors started using words like persistent vegetative state, she started making other arrangements. She liquidated my stock portfolio, all of it, filing the paperwork with my brokerage by presenting herself as my spouse with power of attorney. She cited emergency medical expenses. The billed expenses she referenced don't appear in any hospital record. She sold my vacation property on Lake Erie to a buyer she found herself, at 14% below appraised value, and transferred the proceeds into an account I didn't know existed. She went to my business partners and told them that I had been showing signs of a degenerative neurological condition in the months before the accident, that she'd been concerned for over a year, that the cognitive decline was something she'd been quietly managing. That story explained to them why she needed operational control of the business assets. They believed her. I had built something real, and she used my reputation and my relationships to dismantle it. She told Kevin I'd asked not to have visitors, that the stimulation was too much. Kevin tried 3 times. She turned him away personally each time. He told me this later, sitting across from me in my hospital room looking at his hands. She had my clothes donated to Goodwill. My photos came down from the walls. She was erasing me, methodically, room by room, account by account, while I was breathing through a machine 7 miles away. She stopped paying my private insurance premium 8 months before I woke up. The hospital moved me to a shared ward, and approximately 1 month before I regained consciousness, she asked my attending physician what the process would be for authorizing the withdrawal of life support. My doctor told me this on day 4 of my recovery. That was the first concrete thing I learned about the woman I thought I loved. If you've ever had a moment where you realized the ground under you wasn't solid, that something you built your whole life on was actually hollow, I understand that feeling better than I'd like to. Subscribe and stay with me, because what happens next is something I couldn't have planned if I'd tried. Waking up from a coma is not like waking up from sleep. It's more like a radio signal slowly coming into range. Static first, then fragments, then full reception. My fingers moved on day 2. My eyes tracked light on day 4. By day 10, I could speak in short sentences, understanding more than I let on. I didn't tell anyone how fast I was coming back. Ashley came on day 12. She walked into my room in heels and a camel blazer, stood at the foot of the bed, and set the envelope on my chest. She didn't sit down. She didn't remove her coat. She looked at me the way you look at a piece of furniture that no longer fits the room. "It's too bad you woke up when you did," she said. "It would have been easier for everyone if things had gone the other way." She explained, in the flat tone of someone reading off a list, that there was nothing left. The accounts had been drained, medical costs. The Lake Erie property had been sold, maintenance. The company's core assets had been transferred to an entity she controlled because she'd needed legal authority to manage things while I was incapacitated. What remained was my pension fund and my mother's house, which she'd somehow gotten my mother to co-sign on a line of credit. She needed my signature on both. Her new boyfriend was a 29-year-old fitness trainer named Chad. He'd been driving my BMW. She slid a pen toward me. I did not sign. I told her my memory was still fragmented. I looked at the ceiling and asked her to tell me something about us, something that would help me hold on. I let my voice break a little. She looked at me with a contempt so complete it was almost admirable, and she believed me. She left without saying goodbye, the sound of her heels going down the hallway growing quieter. That night, I asked the night nurse, a woman named Patricia who had been quietly kind to me from the beginning, to help me make a phone call. I needed to reach Frank Hollis. Frank was a patent attorney I'd hired years earlier on a contract dispute. He was 72, semi-retired, and the most methodical human being I'd ever worked with. He didn't trust cloud storage. He kept physical files in a room in his Kettering office, organized with a system only he understood. Exactly the kind of man I needed. Patricia used her personal cell. Frank came to the hospital 3 days later. I told him everything. The ceremony in Nassau, the officiant in the linen suit, the documents on the folding table, Ashley's total control over the paperwork, every financial movement I could reconstruct. He listened without interrupting. Then he cleaned his glasses and said quietly, "Derek, she didn't ask you for a divorce. She asked you to ratify a fraud." We started working, and we worked in the dark because that's the only way it could work. While I pretended to be slower than I was, slurring words slightly when Ashley's contacts came by, letting my hands shake when she visited, giving her the blank expression she expected, Frank was pulling threads. He contacted the civil registry in Nassau. No marriage license. No record of a ceremony at the location she'd described. The officiant's name appeared in no official capacity anywhere in the Bahamas, through a former employee of the talent agency she'd used, which had since closed. Frank obtained billing records. Ashley had paid $640 for 4 hours of an actor's time, including a $200 travel stipend. The invoice still existed in a filing box in that former employee's garage. Every property transfer Ashley had executed while I was in the coma required her to declare herself my legal spouse on notarized documents. She'd done this in front of notaries, bank officers, attorneys, and title company representatives. She had signed her name to fraud, in ink, in front of witnesses, over and over. She'd been so certain I was never coming back that she hadn't bothered to cover the foundational lie. Frank's forensic accountant found the offshore accounts. A shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, opened jointly by Ashley and Chad, had received wire transfers from my company's operating accounts beginning 4 months before my accident. She hadn't been planning this because of the accident. She'd been planning this regardless. The accident had just accelerated her timeline. By the time I had all of this in front of me, I didn't feel rage the way I might have expected. What I felt was colder and cleaner. I had a case, documentation, a lawyer, a forensic accountant, and a trail of evidence she had gift-wrapped and notarized for me across 2 years. She had committed fraud in the most thoroughly documented way imaginable, because she had never believed I would be alive to read it. She was planning an engagement party at my house, using my money. The invitations went to 60 people, a catering company, a tent rental, a jazz ensemble for the backyard. Chad had apparently picked out the centerpieces. The party was scheduled for a Saturday in April, 24 hours before the county DA's office was scheduled to receive our criminal referral package. The civil asset freeze had already been authorized for execution that afternoon at 4 o'clock. 11 weeks after I woke up, I walked out of the hospital on my own. My legs were unsteady if I stood too long, and I'd lost 28 pounds. But I had a dark navy suit that a friend of Frank's had altered to fit what I was now, and a pair of leather shoes that still had a shine. I drove myself to the house. Slowly, carefully, but I drove. When I pulled up to what was still, legally, my property, because Ashley had never had the authority to transfer the deed, the party was going. String lights across the backyard, the clink of glasses carrying through the gate. 60 people inside, drinking my wine, celebrating the life she'd built on top of mine. I walked through the front door. The music kept playing, but the conversations stopped, one by one, spreading outward from the entrance like a wave. By the time I reached the backyard, every person in that space was watching me walk toward the woman who had left divorce papers on my chest 10 weeks earlier. Ashley was standing near the bar with Chad. When she saw me, the color left her face so completely and so fast that I could see the exact edge of her makeup. Her champagne glass didn't quite reach the table. It just stopped, suspended, halfway down. Chad stepped forward. I didn't look at him. "I came to bring you those papers you asked for," I said. I kept my voice low enough that the crowd had to go quiet to hear me. "We've got a problem, though. You can't file for divorce if you were never legally married." Frank walked in behind me. 2 process servers and a county sheriff's deputy came through the gate. The civil suits were served. The criminal referral was confirmed. The asset freeze had executed at 4 that afternoon. Chad's accounts were included. The BMW in the driveway was already being attached to a flatbed. I watched Ashley go through every stage: denial, calculation, the attempt at fury, which couldn't quite get traction. And underneath all of it, settling in like water finding its level, fear. Real fear. The kind that knows it's already lost. The deputy asked her to come with him for a voluntary statement regarding the fraud allegations. He was professional and polite about it. She didn't have a choice. She left my house in the same heels she'd been wearing when she dropped those papers on me in the hospital. One of them caught in the grass near the patio and she stumbled, one arm out for balance. Every person standing nearby looked away. Nobody toward her. Kevin found me a few minutes later and handed me a glass of water. He'd known what was coming. Frank had brought him in too earlier. He sat down next to me in one of the rented chairs and didn't say anything for a while. "You good?" he finally asked. "Getting there," I said. Ashley was indicted 6 months later on 6 counts, including wire fraud, forgery of financial instruments, and theft by deception. Chad entered a plea agreement on reduced charges in exchange for cooperating testimony. The offshore accounts were seized and returned to my estate. The company is mine again. The house is mine. The line of credit on my mother's home was voided. She's in a 1-bedroom apartment now, Kevin told me. I haven't looked her up myself. She has a job she doesn't mention on social media. People ask me sometimes whether the whole thing was worth it. 2 years in a coma, a body that still doesn't move exactly the way it used to. A capacity for trust I'm still working to rebuild. I don't have a clean answer. What I know is this. She believed that my absence would make me someone she could own. She was wrong. A man isn't his accounts or his assets or the square footage of the house he built. Take all of that away and what's left is either something or nothing. She found out which one I am. I keep the divorce papers in the bottom drawer of my desk. I don't look at them often, but they're there, because they remind me that the most dangerous thing I ever did wasn't starting a company with 2 leased trucks and a cold call. It was trusting someone completely without ever verifying that the foundation was real. That's the lesson I paid 2 years of my life to learn, and I'm not going to waste it. If this story connected with you, subscribe. I'm here every week with stories like this one, real, complicated, the kind that don't wrap up cleanly until they do. Leave me a comment. Where are you watching from? And what's the thing someone once tried to take from you that you got back? I want to hear it.